Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, folks, every team's 2024 schedule in the SEC. We're going to discuss that. Now, this is a very daunting task, and this was taken on by 247, and we're going to go through this, and I'm going to give you my opinion on a bunch of these schedules. This was not easy to put together, and this was done by Brad Crawford, again, of 247, and again, it's every team's 8-game conference slate. And it's a pretty good job that he did here. I can't argue with it a ton, but I will argue with some of it, I'm sure. Now, as many of you know, Greg Sankey, who's still bitter and angry that he didn't get his 9-game schedule, even though the SEC doesn't have money in hand from one ESPN, because ESPN's not going to pony up an extra at least $100 million. That would be the bare minimum, because the SEC gets over $800 million a year now from ESPN with an 8-game schedule. A 9-game schedule would mean they'd have to get at least $100 million more, and I don't think the SEC will settle for that because they brought in Oklahoma and Texas. Those are not NC State or Virginia, okay? These are big dog state teams that are really well-known and have a huge footprint as far as viewership. So they're going to want more than $100 million, probably in the neighborhood of $150. It'll have to get close to $1 billion when it's all said and done, similar to the Big Ten, for the SEC to agree to that, in my opinion. So, you know, Greg Sankey's going to have to get to work on ESPN, and that's not going to be easy because ESPN has been really busy getting in politics. If you've watched ESPN, you know they do a ton of politics now, and they've lost a ton of viewers over that. And they're trying to, I guess, get back to their roots a little bit, but once you lose a lot of people, it's really hard to get them back. So when you lose all that viewership and the marketing and advertising market's kind of taking a dip, it's not easy to get that big money going. So we'll see how it plays out. Eventually, we'll go to a 9-game, in my opinion. Now, you almost got to. But it may be a while. And it says the SEC has agreed that the 8-game format will continue the scheduling of primary and secondary rivalries, such as Auburn and Georgia, Alabama and Tennessee, the Texas A&M rivalry, which really, how that didn't play every year is crazy to me. Those are the two teams that ought to play every year, just like South Carolina and Clemson, Auburn and Alabama, Florida State. Those are epic battles, and they matter a whole bunch. The Commodores, they've got them playing Kentucky, Georgia, of course, Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida, LSU, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Vanderbilt. It's just pretty obvious they're going to keep Tennessee in there. The Mississippi State Bulldogs, not terribly concerned about them. So they've got them playing Texas A&M, Bama, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Florida, Auburn, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt. Okay, whatever. Missouri. Now, you'll notice on Missouri's, he does not have Tennessee in there. So that, and there's no big rivalry there. That's kind of a boring game, so I can see how they would block that out. And they've got them playing A&M, Ole Miss, Georgia, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Auburn. Okay, whatever. Oh, the Rebels, the Ole Miss Rebels, and one Lane the Kiffin. Night Train Lane. He's always on that night train heading to another town. They've got him playing Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, and, of course, at Tennessee, which is exactly what I wanted. Everybody wants to see Ole Miss in Neyland for one Lane Kiffin. I can't understand why. I wonder if that'd be a very good theater. Woo! Man, you thought the Alabama game was wild. This one could get really wild. All right, Kentucky Wildcats, they got them playing Georgia, Ole Miss, Florida, and at Tennessee. I think keeping the Kentucky game's pretty important. I think that's kind of a rivalry game, so that makes sense. Texas A&M, South Carolina, Auburn, Vanderbilt. Let's move on to the Auburn Tigers quickly. I don't really care. They're in a rebuilding deal with Hugh Freeze. Georgia, Texas, Bama, Missouri, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Kentucky, and LSU. Don't really have an opinion on that. South Carolina Gamecocks. They've got them playing at Florida, Georgia, Texas A&M, at Vanderbilt, at Kentucky, Tennessee. They kept that. And I think what they're going to try to do is make Tennessee a permanent rivalry with South Carolina. Not because Tennessee and South Carolina are some huge rivalry, even though last year obviously played a role in this. South Carolina doesn't have any permanent, really big rivalries outside of Clemson, and Clemson's not in the SEC. So they're having to kind of give South Carolina some rivalry games, so they'll fit into that top 3. And I may cover what I think that's going to be in another video. Then they got them playing Auburn and Missouri. Now the Gators, very important here. South Carolina, LSU. I definitely think they'll keep Tennessee in the 2024. That's the one that we may lose in the permanent opponents, and I think that kind of stinks. Really, I always like playing Florida because they're my nemesis. They're my Newman.
Hello, Newman.
Hello, Jerry.
To my Seinfeld. We may lose them as permanent opponents because it looks like it's going to be obviously Alabama and Vanderbilt, and then probably South Carolina. I think we're going to they're just going to have to create that out of thin air, so to speak. So South Carolina has 3 permanent opponents. Anyway, then they got Vanderbilt, Georgia, Mississippi State, Texas, and Kentucky. Razorbacks, don't particularly care about them. Mississippi State, LSU, Texas A&M, Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Ole Miss, and Alabama, whoopity-doo, don't care. Texas A&M. Bama, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Texas, Missouri, Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi State. That's not too brutal. The Texas game will be fun. That'll be fun to see. If Jimbo's still there, he's got to rebuild his situation, but he's owed $90 million. Here we go, the Volunteers. He's got us at Georgia and Alabama. And I don't care who you play after you play Georgia and Alabama. You've pretty much got the toughest schedule in the country because they're the top 2 teams in the country virtually every year over the last decade. So you've got a very tough schedule anytime those teams are there. And the only other team that plays both of them is Auburn. So there you go. So for anybody that says, oh, you're going to play Vanderbilt, we play Alabama and Georgia.
Shut up!
Exactly. Shut up. All right. Then at Oklahoma, Norman, South Carolina, Florida, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Ole Miss. Can't wait for that game. We've got some really good ones in here. The Bama game, the Ole Miss game, that Florida game. You're talking about some major goings-ons. And then, of course, the Georgia. Hopefully we can start really playing with them. And that'll be our Nico year. So I'm hoping that he's really strong and we can actually – it would be great to beat them at Georgia. That is a tall task. LSU Tigers. Ole Miss, Bama, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Florida, Texas, Arkansas, and Auburn. That's a reasonable schedule. Georgia Bulldogs, South Carolina, Auburn, Florida, Kentucky, Missouri, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and Alabama. Why does Georgia and Alabama not play every year? You want to talk about a permanent opponent. Those 2 should always play. Based on the last 10 years, they should always play. So anyway, I agree with that schedule just fine. Alabama. Oh, poor Alabama. I hope Nick's okay with this schedule. He'll probably get upset about it because look what he's got. He's got LSU, Tennessee, and, of course, Auburn. And that's the 3 teams he does not want. And then at Georgia. So he's really going to be upset with this. And at Oklahoma, he's going to be going crazy over that schedule. He's going to be so mad because they've had it so tough. Now we got Oklahoma, the newest team in the SEC along with Texas. Got them in Arkansas, at LSU, Texas, of course. You got to play Texas, Oklahoma. That's going to become a huge rivalry. Missouri, Mississippi State, Alabama. Tennessee. I'm looking forward to a Tennessee-Oklahoma game. And then at Texas A&M. Texas Longhorns. Let's see what our other new arrival. Texas A&M, obviously. Missouri, Arkansas, Ole Miss, at Auburn, Florida, Oklahoma, and at LSU. Well, Texas, if they go with this schedule, you got off easy, big boy, because you're not going to have to play Georgia or Alabama at all. So that's a very, very nice schedule for Texas. All right, so there's what 247 thinks the 8-game schedule will be like. And realize Greg Sankey's going to release and reveal the date at prime time on, let's see what date. I believe I know it as June 14th on a special primetime show on the SEC network. So they're going to make a big deal out of this, and a lot of people be watching that. Now, the actual dates of the games will be at a later date, but we're going to find out the teams that each team will play. So that's an exciting day coming up on the 14th, and I'll definitely be watching that. I'm sure you will be too. So there you go, folks. Every team's 2024 8-game schedule according to 247. And those were pretty reasonable guesses, or educated guesses, definitely. 247s, they're good at what they do. And if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's me know to continue to cover the Vols and the SEC and all that good stuff. If you've not subscribed, it's on your right, my left. Just boom, hit that little button. I would appreciate it. Costs you nothing. Helps me out. And right over here's my most recent video. And YouTube thinks you will love it. So be sure to check that one out. We'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.